All right, today we're working on a '01 Audi S4 Avant. This vehicle came in, it's actually bought at auction, so it has a transmission issue. The owner actually is probably going to manual swap it, but he just kind of wanted to know if it was what was wrong with the transmission. So I hooked up Ross Tech or VCDS Lite to go in and scan it. I hit Auto Trans, and I get this message: incorrect COM port selected. I already know it's not an issue there because I just had it on my '01 S4 Avant and it works fine. So I know it's not anything to do with firmware or anything like that. It could be ignition not turned on. It's definitely plugged in. K-line stuck meaning short to ground, short to power. So I'm like, well, is it just related to the transmission or is it other modules too? So I go in and try to talk to the engine, and I get the same message. So it looks like this vehicle definitely has an issue. I can't communicate with, as far as I know, anything. I get the same message every single time. So I'm just going to go through and show a quick way. Well, it's not really it's never quick with these cars, to try to find communication issues. So, I mean, if it's power or ground, it's one thing, but when it's an issue with the communication, in this case, the K-line, it can be problematic for sure because they don't use any sort of splice packs. So all the modules are all wired together on one single wire. So any short to ground or short to power on one can affect all of them, and that's what you'll get. So like in this case, if I know, I'm pretty certain that I have a K-line issue because no matter what module I select, I can't talk to it. For example, if the ABS was offline, but not due to the K-line being shorted, if it was just, say, a blown fuse for the ABS module, it would let me go in. When I click that, it would let me go into the ABS. It would try to communicate, and then it would kick me out. In this case, it immediately knows something's wrong, and it doesn't even attempt. So I'm going to go through and get set up with a couple pieces of equipment to show how I'm going to diagnose this problem. Okay, so I have my data link connector breakout box here. So this just gives you access to all of the pins at the DLC on the car. So, for example, 4 and 5 are always ground, doesn't matter what kind of vehicle it is. 16 is always power, doesn't matter what kind of vehicle it is. Now, all of these in between are different communication protocols depending on the year, make, and model of vehicle that you're working on. This old S4 uses K-line, which is pin 7. So right now, I see there's a problem because there's a little LED here that's supposed to be flashing to indicate the high and low switching, which is communication that's occurring, and it's not. It's just dead. So it doesn't mean that it's stuck, high or low. I mean, it just means it's not. There is absolutely no communication, so there's no switching. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use for this. I got a busted screen on this little scope, but this is a little simple, inexpensive single channel lab scope that I'm going to tie in to pin 7 and then to the ground, chassis ground. And now when I go into this scope, lab scope, okay, so this is 0 volts, this is 14.4. This is what I actually have on this. So it's basically at ground. 0 volts is ground. It's pretty much ground. So it appears that K-line is shorted to ground. That's why the VCDS is doing what it's doing. That's why this light isn't flashing, and why I can't communicate to anything. So the problem with that is these cars aren't easy to figure this out because as I said earlier, every single module, instrument cluster, radio, HVAC, ECM, ABS, central locking pump, transmission control module, they're all tied in to, I'll show you here on the screen. So this is the K-line, this is the communication network for K-line for this car. So this is the data link connector over here. Remember earlier on the breakout box, I said 4 and 5 are ground, 16 is power. So 7 is K-line. So if you follow it over, it goes to radio, then it branches off and it goes to headlamp leveling, navigation, multifunction steering wheel, control module, trans, cluster. So any one of these that if any one of these modules goes bad and either sends power 12 volts here or ground, it kills the network. A lot of newer vehicles, the way the architecture is designed, they will put every one of these wires all into it's like a comb, like a little splice pack. So you can just access the splice pack, pull it out, and then it gives you test points. So you can easily see which module is causing it. We don't have that luxury here, so unfortunately we have to unplug modules one by one and find until we get our network back. And if you unplug every one of them and you don't get your network back, then the wire is shorted somewhere, like a pinch, somebody put a screw through a harness somehow by accident and shorted the wire, something like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and start unplugging a few of these modules and see if we can get this network back online. All right, so I went for the easy things. I mean, it just makes sense. Go for the easy things first, the low-hanging fruit, as we call it. Central locking pump, that's an easy one to unplug. Unplug the engine controller, and I unplug the ABS. Those are pretty much the easy ones. I'm sorry, transmission. It is plugged in right now because it didn't change, so I plugged it back in. That's what I do. I'll unplug one at a time, go back, see if it communicates, and then plug it back in. And a lot of times I'll print out my diagram that I have over there, and I'll just put a check next to it if it's good, if it didn't change anything. So I have all the easy things, relatively easy things to unplug, and I'm gonna check one more time. Still an issue, still no communication. So I'm gonna have to go after, I'm gonna have to pull the instrument cluster out, I'm gonna have to pull the radio and pull out the HVAC and see what's going on. All right, so I'm glad this happened. I should have mentioned this earlier in this video. So go with obvious things first. I didn't even think about this. I didn't pull the cluster, I didn't pull the radio, I didn't do anything. I just made sure everything worked. I knew the cluster worked, and I knew the HVAC worked, but the radio does not. This is likely the problem. So instead of wasting my time pulling a cluster or the HVAC, I'm gonna pull that radio out right now and unplug it. All right, so radio is out. Right off the bat, I noticed as soon as I look at my oscilloscope, my voltage has went, remember earlier it was down here at 0. It's now up to about 13.4. So something has changed. I'm gonna go in, hopefully this auto trans will talk. Yeah, so it's trying to go in, and actually you'll see now this is the messages. This is the K-line communication. This is the scan tool pulling K to ground to initiate communication, and then this is the transmission control module communicating. So, and you also see that light is flashing. So that light flashing is just these highs and lows. So it looks like we're good as far as communication. I don't have any code, so that's not good as far as for the owner, because it probably has a transmission issue internal. But yeah, see, I can get into engine 2. Maybe. K-line is ridiculously slow. Yeah, so we're good. Anyway, so I kind of got lucky on that, but that just goes to show you have to start with the obvious things. And in this case, I didn't start with the obvious. I started with the easy things and then realized that the radio wasn't working. Had I paid more attention early on and saw that the radio wasn't working, I would have went right after it. But anyway, just wanted to show exactly how to diagnose that. I realize some of you may not, well, most of you probably, if you're not a technician, are not going to own a DLC breakout box. You can get these relatively inexpensive, maybe $100, $150. This little U-scope, I don't remember what they cost, but it's not much. Maybe $250, $300. I know that's, for somebody that's not going to use it very often, it's probably a lot of money. But when you have an issue with something and you want to, and I'll be honest with you, you take a car like this with this problem to a shop, you never know what they're going to do. They're going to replace 2, 3, 4 different things, charge you for them, and it may not even fix it. So it's always nice when you can learn how to fix your own car. So that's why I wanted to do this video, to show what you do when you have an issue with no communication. Also, on this note, so you always hear about Volkswagen and Audi with aftermarket radios causing problems. some scan tools when you go in to hook up and you put in the car, as soon as it sees that it's a Volkswagen or Audi, it will ask if it has an aftermarket radio. And the reason for that is because when they're not wired correctly, the radio, because K-line, as you'll see, so I'll stop communication here. Okay, so see, it's 13 volts. So if somebody hooks up the radio, or if somebody doesn't know what they're doing and they accidentally hook and tie into the K-line, and it's now shorted to 12 volts, we'll say it's shorted. If it's sitting there shorted to 12 volts, as soon as so right now when I go to initiate communication, you'll see the very first thing is it goes from high to low. That's the scan tool pulling it to ground. As soon as that happens, it fries your cable. So that's why they say that. So just wanted to cover that as well. Hope you enjoyed the video.